Hello and welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large, coming at you for another hour of podcasting greatness on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and with video here on YouTube. And as you can see, my new studio setup is still in, I think it's still in flux. If you could see beyond the cameras, you'd see things are a little bit messy in here, but I'm setting up for this call-in show that we are going to be starting, and very, very happy about that, and using this for my podcasting, of course, and Q&A shows. So without further ado, let's get right to it. This week, we are joined once again by Mark Bunker, and he has now been elected to the City Council of Clearwater, Florida. When we last had him on, the race was hot and heavy, and now he's here. He won his seat. And Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Happy to be back.
Absolutely, yeah. Happy to have you back. Boy, you are a, for those in the audience who might not have ever heard of you, he is a long-time Scientology critic. Never did Scientology services, but found out about it. What was back in the 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah. So back in the 90s, he started with that. And he gave he really rose to fame when he gave the anonymous movement some very good advice about how to proceed back in 2008, which sort of tempered some of the wild and craziness a little bit and made what they did so much more effective and amazing in that year. And that's really what blew Scientology into the public eye in a huge way and showed up this organization is not just an oddball, goofy, alien cult, but an actually dangerous organization that was abusing people. So we all owe a pretty big debt of gratitude to Mark Bunker for his work over the years here and what he has done in Scientology advocacy. Now, I'm just gonna... He's so humble. Anyway, I just want to set the stage for that because that is who this guy is. And now he has stepped up and he is now on the City Council of Clearwater. And to be clear, Clearwater is the home of Scientology, like basically headquarters for their international world operations, because Clearwater, Florida is where they have their largest delivery facility. It's called the Flag Service Organization, which is on a base of buildings that they refer to as a base because the Sea Org and Scientology run a bit of a paramilitary outfit. And they have a lot of property that they own in downtown and all around Clearwater. So I guess we should start off with saying congratulations for pulling it off. Well done for getting on through that election. How's it going, and what was that like?
Well, I mean, it was pretty startling. I was actually quite surprised that I'd won. I didn't think that I'd gotten my message out far and wide enough because we were limited with cash for our campaign. Other people outspent us like 3 times over. And there's another candidate that I really liked. He and his wife were terrific people, and I'd see them all the time at campaign events. And I figured he was probably a shoo-in. So on election day, I actually was not able to vote because I had been feeling really run down and sick for a week prior to election day. And this was like the day that President Trump gave what I call his hostage video, where he had to do an address from the Oval Office, reading things that weren't. It's fake. It's all fake news. So he did that, which was followed immediately by the news that Tom Hanks and his wife Rita Wilson were both positive. I was sitting there with a cough and a fever and short of breath, feeling horrible. And I thought, oh my God, maybe I've got this this COVID-19. And there was no place to turn at that time. And it is a long-winded story, but I specialize at those. So
No problem.
there was no way to get a test until the day before election day. So I went in and got the test, and then was isolating, so I couldn't go and vote for myself, which is, darn it. I waited my whole life to see my name on a ballot, and I'm deprived of that. Instead, I just stayed home sick and concentrated on that. And then results were in like around 7 o'clock, I think was when the polls closed. And around 6, I went, hey, wait a minute, the polls are going to close soon. It was like the first time I thought about it all day. And got online and started following the results and was just stunned, you know. So it was kind of a surreal type of thing where it wasn't even on my mind that day, and then my life changed. So it's all been very exciting, and I've gone up and down with the health for a few weeks after that, but I'm much better now and raring to go. So far, we've been doing our meetings virtually. Apparently, that's going to change in a couple of weeks, but
Oh yeah, because you're in.
whether that's wise or not, we'll see. But this COVID-19 is something that none of us on the campaign trail thought we'd have to deal with. So right off the bat, this is just an amazing time to take office. So much worry and concern in this community as everywhere. And I didn't think I'd be mentioning Scientology at all for months and months and months and months because we've got this to worry about. And yet Scientology keeps coming up. So one of the first things that happened, and again, this is me doing a monologue, so I apologize. But there were people who were videotaping Sea Org members getting off crowded buses and not doing the social distancing. So I tried looking into that and asked the city to do some inspections, and the chief of police was allowed to go into Scientology's public buildings, the Fort Harrison Hotel and the Superpower building, and he was shown around, and he said, hey, everything looks pretty good around here. But that didn't, they can put on a nice show, and cleaning up the areas for the wealthy public. Yeah, they'll do a good job at that, but the people who have to do all that polishing and disinfecting are the Sea Org members, who are the ones who are crammed into these crowded buses and go home to really cramped living quarters where there's way too many people in a single apartment. And the city was saying, well, you have to have a warrant to go investigate in somebody's home. So we really can't do anything about that. But I kept asking enough questions, and there was enough pressure from the media, including Tracy McManus at the Tampa Bay Times, who's excellent. So we actually got an inspection of some of Hacienda Gardens, which is the Sea Org berthing, and another unit down the road there. But again, before they allowed Chief Slaughter to come in and do an investigation, they had days to get everything prepared. They showed him the common areas, and then he had the ability to choose 3 random apartments in each complex. But again, they've got the Sea Org staff ready to make everything look perfect. So it's not exactly like a spot inspection. But at least, that we were able to get some answers for family members who were very concerned about their disconnected kids who are in the Sea Org. And Scientology doesn't seem at all happy about that. Now, I've been looking at this as looking out for the health of the members and the community as a whole. But Scientology has now sent a public records request for anything that has to do with me and the chief and the police department and welfare checks. I was like, really? Okay, you'll get it.
They have to keep those files up.
Yes.
In OSA, they have extensive dossiers and files on you, me,
Absolutely.
Mark Rinder, Tony, Mike Rinder, Tony Ortega, Aaron Smith-Levin, etc.
Uh-huh.
So, they got to keep up on what you guys are up to.
Yep, that's for sure. And now they have the ability to actually ask for any of my communications, whether it's on the city or on my own private accounts. If I'm talking about city business and Scientology, I have to turn that over. So
Interesting.
it's kind of like back in the LMT days when I spent much of my time producing video for court cases. Okay, we need this as evidence. There you go. So it's a time waster more than anything else. It's not like they're going to find anything that I don't say out in public.
Right. Yeah, no smoking gun sitting there.
Yeah.
So obviously COVID-19 has derailed all predictions and plans that were in place. Curious how just the regular, getting indoctrinated as a city council member, learning the rules and learning the scope of activity and responsibility. What did you see accurately coming, and what was surprising to you about getting into the job and the work of it?
Well, what's surprising is, and a lot of this is because no one's going into the office now. I mean, there's only a handful of people that actually go to any office to work, those essential employees. But I went in for my orientation, met a few people, and was sworn into office, and then shown the ropes a bit. And I asked, well, what are the office hours? And they said, well, there are none. You can come and go as you please. I went, what? So that surprised me. And it turns out that I'm constantly busy because there's plenty of things to be reading and studying throughout the day, and I've got books and books worth of material that I'm going through. New phone meetings all the time. We use Zoom and all these other video communication tools to have meetings all the time. So it's fascinating to see behind the scenes and get a new perspective. And it's a little, how can I best put this? Having been on the outside, going to the meetings and talking about all these issues, or even just hearing about like the downtown project where we're planning to spend $64 million plus on creating a beautiful new park downtown to bring people down to the area that no one wants to go to because of Scientology. And my argument all along before and along the campaign trail was, having a prettier park than the one we have right now, I'm not sure that that's going to convince people to come downtown because of the presence of Scientology there. So now I'm making those arguments from inside. And it is odd now to think, well, okay, I'm one of those voices now that actually decides the future of these projects, and you know all these things that come before the council. So uh, having been an activist and now suddenly a member of the council, it's quite interesting and an adjustment.
I'll bet. I'll bet it is because you see, like obviously not the same as a city council. I've been on a board of directors for a nonprofit, and it is quite interesting how when you get to that level, you suddenly go from a member level to the leadership level, and you're like, oh, I didn't know about this and this and this, and oh, there's this complication and this wrinkle that the members aren't necessarily aware of. Is that the kind of thing you run into at that level already?
Oh yeah, yeah. You find out a bunch of stuff that um, starts to fill in gaps in your education. You go, okay, all right, I understand that. Um, and just overall, it's been a fascinating experience, and I'm really enjoying it, and I'm glad I've got 4 years to go with this.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the term was. 4 years. That's a good long time.
Yeah,
Enough to
not
actually
bad
get,
at all.
yes, enough time to get some things done. What, just to clarify and really nail this down, because this is something I've actually been very curious about since this whole thing started. What powers do you have from the level of the city council as far as reining in, Scientology, or what Scientology as an entity
Mhm.
is doing there?
Sure. Well, we're not going to shut them down. We're not going to chase them out of town. So, folks who are expecting that, well, I'm sorry, I I can't do that, and that's not my goal at all. I'm not trying to take Scientology away from anyone. I'm not trying to take LRH away from anyone. I think Scientology should be honest, and we should be working to get answers as to what the hell's going on downtown with all these properties that they've purchased. And I'll have a chance to do that from a couple different posts. I was against Scientology's deepest, darkest wishes. I was appointed to the Downtown Development Board, which is an advisory board about um, bringing life back to downtown, which now has the majority of Scientologists sitting on the board. So at the last council meeting, we had a steady stream of, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 Scientologists, 4 or more of which are currently on the Downtown Development Board or have been past members. And they very angrily came forward to denounce me and saying this is a horrible move. You can't let him be on the board, which is silly. I mean, what am I going to do? I'm, at the most, I'll ask a question. But they were painting me as this dangerous individual when everyone knows I'm completely adorable. So,
Of course.
um, but you mentioned the fact that they have every utterance I've ever made on the internet, and they've printed it out, cataloged it. They've got files worth of everything I've ever said. So it really shocked me when the chairman of the board of the Downtown Development Board appeared at that council meeting to deliver a quote from me that was some pretty nasty type of comment that came from Mark Bunker. And I went, that doesn't sound like me. And afterwards, I went home and did a Google search for it and found out that it was actually a comment on my old blog, the WOG blog, that was made in 2006, where somebody from England was saying, the term WOG is horrible, and it means something entirely different in England. So I took his comment and put it in the start of a new blog entry and said, here's what was just posted in the comments, and let's talk about this. And buried in that little comment was this line that they pulled out and attributed to me. It's like, if that's the hardest thing that they have against me, is something I never even said, then, I don't know how they're going to fill up that Freedom magazine.
Exactly.
By the way, those are the folks who made the request for all the public records now. It's Freedom magazine. So I may be getting my own special issue of Scientology's propaganda magazine.
Yeah, I would absolutely count on that. I'm sure they're putting together a special Clearwater edition with your name on it. Have there been, obviously, I'm not going to ask you to name names or anything like that, but I'm wondering, has there been conversations already, with other city council members or government officials or people or whatever about Scientology, about the Scientology presence and threat and what to do about it?
Sure, within the city. Even before I was elected, I went through the Clearwater Academy, which is this 10-week series of courses where you meet all the department heads. You learn how what they do, how they function, and so I got a chance to meet a lot of these people beforehand, and then as a candidate, all the candidates had meetings set up to sit down and talk with them individually, and during the run up to the campaign, I talked about my beliefs, and even to and there were surprising reactions with everyone I talked to. I even talked with the police union and the firefighters union, and they both had some interesting questions, and I spoke about my desires and really need to take care of this issue of Scientology interfering with business downtown, having this negative impact on the city for decades now. And that's something that we will be dealing with, because I'm going to force us to deal with it finally. No one's ever actually talked so frankly about Scientology as I have, and I'm not afraid to keep pushing on it. There's also, there have been some surprising comments from people thinking that the Tampa Bay Times should stop reporting on Scientology, which is like, really? That's not the problem. Scientology is the problem, not the stories about it. So it's always surprising to see that. But that's not widespread. And I find when I talk to people, whether it's in the city or, within the city government or out, if I ever hear someone say, like on the campaign trail, I have occasionally somebody come up and say, you have to stop talking about Scientology. We've got a business downtown, and it doesn't help when you do that. And I'd say, well, what is the biggest impact on your business? Why is it slow? Why can't you get anyone here? And they'd say Scientology. And I'd say, well, see, not talking about it is not accomplishing anything. So we've got to address this. So we'll do that along the way. We've got to find out what the hell's going on with all these buildings that they purchased over the past 3 years with cash, and they're just sitting there unused. And there's two Scientologist developers that are coming back in front of the city asking for $500,000 for a project they want to do to recondition this total rundown, vacant eyesore. Um, and it was purchased in this period with cash. A building that's been owned by Scientologists for a long, long, long time. Scientology has used it as a storage area, as a place to deliver OT3, for training auditors over the years, even though Scientology didn't own the building. They always had access to it, apparently. So that will open the doors to ask some of these questions as to, was there any type of coordination here in the purchase of all these properties? So there's more opportunities than I expected during this period to actually bring up the issue, and we're just getting started. So,
Excellent. How is the population of Clearwater?
what's the size? It's 117,000, I think. 115 or 117. I've forgotten because I'm getting old.
No worries. Just wanted to contrast that with, didn't it come out that there were really only pretty small number? I think Aaron was talking about this after the election, that there was just a couple thousand Scientologists who came out and ended up voting. I mean, I don't know that we can parse it down to the exact number. I don't think, I don't think it's identified that closely, but small number comparatively speaking. Did I get that right?
Yes, and that's clear, that they aren't the the juggernaut that they pretend to be here, because I got elected. I mean, they were doing everything they could to prevent me from being elected, and the people of Clearwater said, "We want that guy." So, for all the politicians who've been worried that it's the kiss of death to even mention Scientology, we've shown that's not the case anymore. So I won't be surprised if we see more people step up and run for office as well.
Excellent. Well, and that's exactly the point I wanted to make. So I'm glad that that is actually true, because their bark is worse than their bite, apparently, when it comes to something they really, really, really want to prevent from happening. They could not stop you from doing that.
Right. They run on intimidation, and they've set themselves up over the decades as this not a turn the other cheek religion, and they've kind of ruled through fear and intimidation. What they're good at is putting pressure on you, to keep calling, keep writing, keep in your face until you say, all right, I'll check into this for you, just to get them off your case. But are they going to sue us? I don't think so. I mean, if Scientology is going to sue the city, and I'm not trying to give them any reason to sue, but it looks like David Miscavige has had his fingers in everything here in the city, especially pitching his suggestion that he take over the entire downtown and redevelop it. So it seems like if they're going to sue, how is David Miscavige going to escape being deposed? And that's the one thing that he hates more than anything. If there's a chance of him having to answer questions, well, I think right there, that's a nice piece of protection for the city. We'll find out.
Yeah, it's a deal breaker for sure. Him getting deposed is something he ain't interested in any way, shape, or form. I think it's also quite telling that the places where Scientology has put Scientologists is the Downtown Development Board, not other areas of the government, as far as we know. Is that right? Or are they also in other areas too?
No, they're not in other areas. The Downtown Development Board is a special board made up of elected officials, but the only people who can vote for that board are people who live or work downtown. So it's a very tiny subset. And downtown is where Scientology is. So it's been a lot easier for them to take over that council. I also heard secondhand rumors that one of them on the board had said, we now control the downtown development board, and soon we'll control city council. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. Once you get out of their little stronghold, they don't have the power that they think they do.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think they do sort of rile each other up over how strong and influential they are. I
Yeah.
certainly participated in many such conversations and, rah-rahs when I was a Scientologist and Sea Org member. Even though I was based out in LA, the mantras and the methods of operation are exactly the same. They're just pretty intensified in Clearwater because it's such a tiny, tiny little place, whereas Los Angeles is huge, and Scientology is just another voice in the crowd there. In Clearwater, they dominate the conversation just because of their, the size of their presence.
Yeah.
What now? Obviously, as a city council member, there is, your view is the eagle eye view. You have to maintain objectivity. You have to maintain the 50-yard view.
Sure.
But I have to ask about the police because, basically, to be blunt, I mean, we've all been pretty blunt about the fact that Clearwater police seem to be very gentle and restrained and, sort of kid gloves when it comes to dealing with Scientology. And it seems that, there's a lot of concern about, well, they pay police for off duty, security time, things like that at events. That could be a way of influencing individual police members or the force as a whole. They do this in Los Angeles consistently. And when money starts getting involved, then intentions start getting a little murky. And so one wonders about this. Is there anything the city council can do about that kind of thing?
Well, sure. But let me defend the police department, which I've been doing for years since I moved back here, really. This is not because I'm on the city council now. But back in 2000 and 2001, when I was living here working for the Lisa McPherson Trust, which was set up to help people who had been abused or defrauded by Scientology, that's when Scientology really started to pay the officers to work every day, sitting on the street that we shared with Scientology's Office of Special Affairs, the Dirty Tricks Department. And they were there to protect the Scientologists from us. And it was just insane. During that period when they had a regular paycheck from Scientology, there were instances that I recorded on tape and put together in the infamous Scientology and the Clearwater Police video. So back in 2000, we could see that there was a negative effect to these guys having a regular paid job off duty. Because there was a clear bias that comes from, thinking, well, I'm here, I'm here to do my job as an officer, but I'm working as security. And if these people are upset, the easiest thing to do is say, get away from here, and not try, take a balanced view of it. So there were problems at that time. But after the LMT left town at the end of 2001, that regular side job is gone. So the officers do get hired to do crowd control for infrequent events for Scientology, or there's a picket. There's a chance of a picket. They'll pick up some extra cash at that point. but it hasn't been like it was in the past. And there have been so many attempts by Scientology to use this permanent injunction that was gotten back in originally 99 against Bob Minton. And then it kept increasing to add more members of the Lisa McPherson Trust as we came to town. They've been using that for 20 plus years now to stop any type of protests, even though it names specifically those of us who were at the Lisa McPherson Trust and anyone acting in concert with us. Well, after all of us had moved out of the area, 10 years later, people who I had never met or spoken with, and nobody at the LMT had, would come to town, and or like when Anonymous came forward and they started having protests here. Scientology tried to use that injunction to stop those protests. And one Chicago attorney who goes by the nickname Darth Xandar online, he regularly comes down here and tests the injunction. And he got arrested one day, several years ago. And he contested that, and then the city said, "All right, we're not going to use this injunction against anyone who's not named in it." Then when I moved back into town, Scientology tried to use that injunction to have me evicted for daring to have a neighbor who was a Scientologist. And we sat down with the police department at that point. My attorney, Dennis DeFlaming, and I had a meeting with the chief of police then. And we were hoping that the police department would side with us and we go back to court and have the injunction dismissed. But Scientology had come in for a meeting with the police department 15 minutes before we got there. So when we arrived, we were told, "Oh, yeah, they were just here. And we want to keep the injunction in place. It's working." So we dropped the costly efforts to try to have it dissolved. And then over the years now, especially with Chief Slaughter, who is now the police chief, I've had a good relationship with him, and they have said, we're not going to arrest you. We're not going to do anything like that. We come out, we'll take we'll write a police report because they have to. If somebody says, "Hey, we've got trespassers here," it's the police department's job to go out and find out what's going on and then say, "Well, you're going to have to leave." That's what happened when Leah Remini was there with her film crew for Scientology in the aftermath. Now, the police officers who arrived at the scene, they were as polite and professional as could be. Even though, there were several squad cars there. But in most cases, you don't see a TV crew at a scene like this where a guy's just sitting on a bench and then a big TV star. So, the first squad car calls back and says, oh, we got something going on here. What should we do? And then there's a whole lot of conversations, and ultimately it was resolved fine. And that's the way it's always been for me since I moved back here in 2013. The police will ask to look at your ID, and there are people who say, "No, you don't have to show me your ID." Yes, you should show them your ID. There's nothing wrong here. So they make a record, and so I can have a copy of the record myself just to show that this happened. But it's not like they're on the dole and they're doing Scientology's job.
Mm.
It's more, we got to answer Scientology's call again. All right, well, we better do this right because they're never going to stop complaining about it. So let's do this. It's not, they're not coming in with billy clubs. They're not they're not doing anything outrageous. They're doing their job, and like so many people here in Clearwater, people find themselves trapped with the inescapable pressure from Scientology. That how do I deal with this now? Whether you're a business owner or you're, whatever it is, city employee, it's a unique problem that most cities don't have to deal with.
It is
But
very
one thing I learned from being at working at a couple TV stations in San Diego, when they want to put the pressure on to get you to not air uh, a, a report on your TV station, it's nonstop. It's calls, it's emails, it's letters, it's showing up at your door, trying to convince you that no, these are lies. You can't talk to somebody like Mark Bunker. Oh my God, this is horrible. And it's all just that hardcore press to make things go right. Because the Scientologists themselves are under pressure. You've got to stop this. You've got to prevent this and theta from getting out to the world. So that's what it's like dealing with Scientology. You just, they're hoping someday you'll just toss out your hands in the air and go, all right, already, whatever you want, just leave me alone. More than anything else, I think that's the impact that they have on the police department. And again, I look back fondly at the time when the police department really took them seriously, and they had training for the new recruits on how Scientology operates. And when Scientology sued the city in 1995, there was an affidavit written by Captain Paul Mazur of the police department. Scientology was trying to find out the names of the undercover officers who were investigating Scientology. And Captain Mazur wrote an affidavit saying, no, we don't want to turn over this information because of Scientology's fair game policy, and listed all the things that Scientology does to get back at people. So that was the frustrating thing for me when I moved here at the end of '99, just a few years after the police department produced that affidavit, to see that the officers were working for Scientology. And to see them, like I one day I drove past Watterson Street where one of the off-duty officers was sitting out there with the security guard, and the security guard brought out an issue of this magazine that had a planted story about Bob Minton having stolen $5 billion from Nigeria. All crap. That was a Scientology operation through and through, later exposed as that. That really infuriated me, to see that the officers would say, well, no, we're not being influenced by any of this. You're sitting there reading this magazine, being paid by them, getting meals from them. There's got to be some influence there, but those ties have really severed. It's not like that anymore. So rather than the daily job that they had, many of them, now it's just, a few times a year they'll do crowd control, something like that.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, fair enough. I mean, you're on the ground. I'm not. So my judgment of this is entirely based on my understanding of human nature and how Scientology operates, and the ruthless efficiency with which the Office of Special Affairs operates. And exactly like you said, both in front and behind the scenes, they are like that. That tenacity, that persistence, it just doesn't ever stop. And it's really a matter of, these are people who don't have anything else to do all day except Scientology's bidding.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, as Scientologists, right? So yeah, this is how a legitimately tiny group can have, such presence and such and generate such an impingement on a community. And the same thing happens all the places where Scientology is based, especially around the Sea Org organizations and bases, which is, again, where Clearwater is the largest of those, and Los Angeles is the next largest. Well, okay, so you have faith in Chief Slaughter, and that is actually encouraging to hear. I'm actually glad to hear that. I'm going to remain skeptical about the police force there because again, I just kind of, I don't trust Scientology, and they are surprisingly effective at what they call safe pointing, which is where they contact individuals who are influential in a situation or community or area, and they get that person to become an ally of Scientology, and they do it exactly like you just described. They use propaganda. They don't tell the truth. They tell very, very what they would refer to as, according to their own policies, acceptable truths.
Right.
They tell truths that this person will accept, and that's how they move forward and gain ground and gain allies. Is they can never be upfront and just tell you what they're actually doing. That's
Absolutely
cards for Scientology, and I know that from my own experience behind the scenes with Scientology. I'm not saying that as though I have some suspicion about it. That's absolutely how they are. So,
sure.
All right. Well, fair enough. But I accept your assessment of the situation because, like I said, you're on the ground there, and I am not. And it is good news. It is good news that the police is not as
Yeah, but so now the chief has pressure on both sides because he doesn't want to have to be bothered by somebody saying, "Hey, will you go and do a welfare check on for this family?" It's like, can't I just do my job? Why am I in between all this stuff? Like he first, first he investigated, and this is nothing, not a slam against Chief Slaughter, but because the newspaper and I was asking questions, he went over and got the tour of all the public places, and then he saw me a couple days later when I was at a Salvation Army, and we've been giving out food to all these hundreds of families who came by. He showed up and said, "Hey, are you happy now?" And I said, "Well, no, not really, because I'm really concerned about the Sea Org people." And he was like, "Okay." Well, he was trying to disguise that, but I'm sure he wanted to hear, "Yes, thank you so much." And I did say thank you so much for doing that because I did appreciate that. But it's, Scientology is pressuring one side, and now he's got somebody pressuring from the other side as well. So, a lot of times these people feel they're caught in the middle. But I'm trying to do what I think is right.
Well, good. And this is why we are so happy that you are there, is because you are a voice of sanity and reason in, a place that has been a bit confused and difficult to figure out. And we haven't had a voice from the inside at the city council government level. So, so this is good. This is very, very good. And it's obvious, and I want to comment on this too, because when I say, well, we have a voice and we have this and we have that, it's not like I'm trying to say you're our guy. Is you do have to maintain objectivity as a city council member. That's the job.
Sure.
We want that. So we want Scientology's rights to be recognized. It's just that we also want the abuse of those rights to be recognized too. And it seems that because of the amount of trouble that they put forward on people's plates when somebody tries to step up and do something about them, that it's very easy to just back off from that and just let Scientology have its way. And they get away with things that they absolutely positively must not be allowed to get away with when they are given that kind of rope. So
Yeah.
that's exactly as you said. That's the conundrum for all government officials dealing with these guys. But at least now we have somebody there who understands the problem to its core. And I don't know that we've had that in the history of this so far, except for that very interesting affidavit you mentioned. So the police force definitely is fully aware of how far Scientology will go in terms of fair gaming.
Well, I mean, back when they snuck into town in 75, everyone in the government discovered how far Scientology would go. with all the covert operations that were uncovered, all the dirty, nasty, underhanded operations against Gabe Casares and anyone else who stood in their way, everyone had an understanding. I mean, back in 1982, when the city did a weeks-long set of hearings televised in the area with people like Paulette Cooper, who wrote one of the first books critical of Scientology, everyone in the city got an understanding of exactly what Scientology is and how they operate. And somewhere along the way in the late 90s, a new city manager came into town, Mike Roberto, who was from Palm Beach, I believe, or Miami. And he said, there I had to deal with the mob. And Scientology is no different from that. So what they tried to do is just get them off the front page of the paper and just try to let them do their thing. And then that evolved into, after the LMT closed, and they brought in Representative Mary Repper to do lobbying and to make it acceptable for politicians to go in and hold speeches at the Fort Harrison Hotel and get cozy with Scientology. That was a whole nother evolution. So we're moving the clock back a little bit to say, hey, there's a reason why people are upset with Scientology, and it's not the faith, it's not the beliefs, we're not trying to take, the religion away from you or come down on individual Scientologists who are good, decent people. They want to save the planet, but in doing so, you can do things that go to extremes. Like Mike Render's a friend of mine now. He set out to destroy Bob Minton and ran covert operations against all of us. And yet he's not a bad guy. And it takes some time to realize the type of things that Philip Zimbardo was, I think that's his name, professor who was doing all these studies about how you can get good people to do bad things. It is easier than you think to convince somebody that they're doing the right thing, and you're actually doing something horribly, horribly wrong. So, I tend to think of the Scientologists who are still in as potential future friends. So when they come and attack me, like even these people on the board who came out to say I was essentially Hitler, I'm not holding it against them. That's what L. Ron Hubbard told them to think, and that's their mindset. And that's why I feel I can fairly, help out any Scientologist that needs to help, and just understand a little bit more about Scientology than perhaps many other people in the city do. But I think I can be fair to them. And as with the case where I was doing a welfare check on Sea Org people, I'm looking out for their best interests, not harassing Scientology as the leadership seems to think I was doing. Anyway, that's my goal.
Fair enough. Well, your tolerance is angelic. and and I really seriously, I mean, considering that you were part of the Lisa McPherson Trust, and there's a whole backstory there, which we're trying to dancing around a little bit here because it's a long story. It's very involved. We won't get into it right now in
I
depth.
think we went through it, a lot of that in the last video.
Yeah, exactly. You really were at the receiving end of the both barrels of Scientology at that time, and so it's it really is quite an inspiration to listen to you speak so tolerantly about them. It really is. It's quite awesome. Um, okay, now what about fair gaming during the campaign? Dare I ask, and will you say, did anything happen?
Well, I mean, and not as much as I expected, although there's probably plenty of things that I was not aware of. We did talk last time about, one of the other candidates who got into the race late, and whose campaign manager had been seeking a candidate for some time since I announced that I was going to run. He was going around to other candidates saying, "We're going to give you all the votes you need, all the money you need. You just have to let us choose what seat you run for." Um, and other people thought, "Okay, well, they just want me to go up against you, Mark." So he eventually found a candidate to use against me, and then there was a handful of Scientologists who came to heckle me at a few events. They had a smear website that I'm sure they spread far and wide. But beyond that, and I'm sure I'm sure they sent somebody in to my public meetings as well, because the first meeting that I had for supporters before even filing, Tracy McManus asked if she could come and observe it. And I said, absolutely. She wasn't writing a story about it. She just wanted to see what it was going to be like. Somebody posted online that Tracy had been there. So we probably had some Scientologist plants in the room. But I never say anything that I'm not going to say in public anyway. So, I don't care. Other than that, I can't think of anything that they actually did. I thought in order to actually get elected, I need to have my own copy of Freedom magazine delivered right before the voting day to actually get people's attention. And it turned out I didn't need that after all. So they've had a little more time to work on it now, and hopefully later on in the year we'll see some dazzling journalism about me.
Yes, I am quite sure that we will. And it will actually be quite interesting to see. I mean, I don't mean this like you're some kind of guinea pig or something. You've already been at this for decades. You know what these guys are about. So, and you know how to defend yourself and stay sharp and keep your security and all that in. So, but I just say it'll be interesting because of what they have pulled in the past.
Sure.
And it seems that over the last 15 years or so, they really have been defanged in so many ways. And we don't see efforts made like they used to make, where they would go after a person so ruthlessly. I mean, the Paulette Cooper stuff with the, trying to get her to commit suicide and, having people like literally in her personal life who were reporting back to Scientology daily. So you knowing that, I'm assuming you have sort of set up your life so that sort of thing can't happen. But I'm sure there are people who are worried about you because of because of your. So I'm
something
this for their comfort, because I think they might worry about you.
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, it's not. It's 20 years ago now. Well, we think back to Paulette Cooper. That was the 70s.
Mm.
Um, in 2000, in 2001, I got to watch the global campaign that they ran against Bob Minton, and that was just as dishonest and as expensive and as as horrific a covert operation as they did against anyone back in the Guardian's office days. They're just smarter in how they don't put it in writing anymore, and they use external lawyers to hire PIs to do a lot of the dirty work. But I don't think they've really changed their spots. I'm sure that they're, planning something. But am I going to worry about it? Nah. What can I do? If I was going to worry, I wouldn't have run. I think you just have to take a stand and show that it's okay, really. I ran for office. They called me a bigot at a few events, and it gives me a chance to explain why people are concerned about the way the organization works, not about the faith or beliefs or the members, but just the way the organization is set up and the way they try to bully anyone who gets in their way. So my feeling is we just have to show we can't be bullied, and I think that's paying off. I don't think going forward that politicians will be shy to talk about this in the future. And we've got time to go. Granted, the entire world is concerned as I am with COVID-19 right now. So Scientology is convinced that I'm out there working with the federal government to strip them of their IRS tax status. Not yet. That'll probably come along somewhere down the road, but we've got time. But yeah, I just don't let them know. Yeah, I'm on this. So we'll see what we can do. It's not something that we in the Clearwater government can do, but if we can get the attention of others and work with others to get this addressed, I'm going to push for that. So
excellent.
Just to say, Scientology, we're on to you. we know how you operate.
Well, I think actually from your position as a bit of a, I guess we could say, insider or upper level official now, you really are going to have the ability to be able to coordinate better with federal regulations, and the IRS is a group that definitely needs to be paying a bit more attention to what Scientology is about. Okay, well now, again, COVID-19, obviously a much bigger problem right now than Scientology is, and getting everybody past that, especially in Clearwater, where it's such a retirement community. What are your goals now and expectations for the immediate and maybe medium range future as you see it? What are you working on? What are you trying to accomplish, and what are you pushing on?
As far as COVID-19 or
just as a city council member in general? I know COVID-19 is a big part of what's going on right now, but
yeah. Well, we've got a lot of big things on the plate right now, including reopening the city. And there's pressure from both sides, people saying, you've got to open it up, and please don't open it up. We've got the Imagine Clearwater proposal that's coming before us again at the next city council meetings in the first week of May. Big decisions there as to whether we spend this $64+ million worth of money during this time to build a fancy park. Um, we've got to work out a way to help people in the community, because right now we're not getting help from the federal government. None of the money that's been pushed out so far from the federal government goes to cities our size. And we've got people here who are just struggling to stay alive and to, pay the rent and put food on the table. So those are big issues now. And moving forward, making connections with all of our neighborhoods and make sure that everyone's represented. There's things that pop up every day that we have to address, and that's what I'm discovering. Is okay. Now here's some reports for you to read. Here's some information you're going to need to make a decision on this and that and this. So there's always something that we're dealing with. But being responsive to the folks here in Clearwater is my number one goal. And I know the largest reason I got elected was they want somebody who's serious about Scientology. So that's always part of it as well.
Big time. Big time. Well, your analogy, by the way, about the mafia, or that other person's analogy,
Right.
shared about the mafia, dead on accurate. And this is the reason why people, who are associating with Scientology there in Clearwater, giving speeches at Scientology headquarters and things like that, not a good look. And I hope that is something that is, a viewpoint that is propagating through the city, I hope.
Yeah, that's always backfired. After the Leah Remini two-parter about Clearwater, the police department got hell from viewers, thinking that they're paid off by Scientology. One of the things that happened is people started showing pictures of Chief Slaughter taking pictures at the Fort Harrison Hotel with a diploma or something that somebody received. And he said, "Okay, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not going to be going there and posing for pictures."
Good.
So there is a backlash from the public about things like that.
Good. Well, it's good to know, actually, getting the after story, because we don't necessarily hear. We know that I remember Chief Slaughter put a statement out. Look, we're not overly influenced by Scientology and all that. Well, okay, but actions in this realm speak louder than words. And there's been, as way better than us, through direct experience, there's been some pretty rough stuff that's happened in the past. So I really am encouraged by what you're saying, and I really do hope that that the police force, the other people that you're working with on the city council can actually really effectively push back against these guys, because they do seem to have unlimited money and bizarrely mysterious reach into places where you just didn't even see them coming from. And this persistency, this tenacity, they just don't have anything else to do all day except what they do. So they match other people's, they overwhelm through that kind of intensity, and it's
Yeah.
very difficult to fight back against. So this has been an encouraging podcast for me, as far as hearing what you're saying here. I think we have good things in the future on this line, and exactly what you were elected for. So do you have any other future plans you'd care to share with us, or that you can be open about at all? I know there's probably some things you don't want to be open about.
Yeah. No, there's nothing else that I'm going to spill right now. Just a general goal to make sure that we understand how Scientology operates, and that we we hold them to account for some of these actions. Like, we need to have some way for people to get out their experiences of intimidation downtown, whether it's a business that decided to leave because of pressure from Scientology, or customers who run into problems, or people who live down there who are getting hell from Scientology. The pressure is always applied. So we just need to be able to document all that and say, listen, this has got to stop. So there are things we'll be able to do along the way. Beyond that, I don't want to be too specific.
No problem. I totally get that. Okay, Mark. Well, listen, thank you very much for taking the time to update us on what's going on there now that you're on the city council. And again, congratulations, man. This was a serious, serious step up. And I've acknowledged it on social media, but I just want to say straight up, dude, you're a hero. I mean, this is really seriously stepping up and doing something for real against Scientology, not just going on social media and talking about it, which, there's a certain amount of effectiveness I feel I have in terms of a voice and using it and exposing and talking about my past and all that. But, I admire the hell out of people who actually do more, who actually step up and really walk the walk. And that's what you're doing. And I really, really want to acknowledge that. And I think we all are going to continue to owe you some debts of gratitude as this moves forward here as to what you're going to accomplish. And you've got so much backing and support from the community here. And I just want to put that out there and say that out loud. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to reject the label of hero, but I do accept adorable. So if people just want to clamor and let the world know that I'm adorable, that's plenty for me.
Well, thank you very much. Properly humble. Wise. All right, man. Thanks very much for coming around and being part of this, folks. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, good, bad, or sideways, leave it in the comments section here on YouTube or at sensiblyspeaking.com. And of course, you can always reach out to Mark Bunker through official channels. He is now an official city council member, so you guys can just go to the city council websites and contact forms and all that and reach out to him however you want that way. Again, Mark, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Folks, see you next week. Bye-bye.